All right. So today's topic is going to be the 3 shifts of the Common Core State Standards. And there's going to be a lot of words that I throw at you today. And the method that I'm going to use to keep track of our learning is going to incorporate a lot of vocabulary words. So as I'm teaching this, kind of pay attention to how you can teach your kids unfamiliar vocabulary words also. And then, of course, as I take notes with a graphic organizer. So today, our very first piece of one of the shifts is going to be this concept of independence. And I just did a whole video on how to create independent readers. And you can watch that video. But independence is one of the key components of the Common Core State Standards. The reason why is because when kids get into college or when they're doing their work, they are going to need to do that independently. Your boss doesn't come over and hold your hand and give you scaffolds and help and all that good stuff that you get in school. So let's make a nice big chart. I call this an eye chart because it looks like it has a capital I here. And I tell the kids that the I stands for independence. And what we are going to use this chart for today is to talk about the old ways of teaching and the old standards, and then we'll explore the new standards. These old ones were called the CEFs, stands for Curriculum Essential Framework. It was just a bunch of little tiny pieces of a standard, all kind of disconnected. And these new standards now are called the Common Core State Standards. Each state may have a different adjustment of the name, and in Nevada, we call them the Nevada Academic Content Standards. They are exactly the same thing, it's just that states decided to adopt their own name. So the question that kids always seek to answer is why? Why did we have to make this shift from the old standards into these new standards? First of all, today we'll talk about the 3 ways that these new standards are actually more rigorous than the old standards. Rigorous, when you first hear that word, I know I think about like rigorous exercise where you're working harder and sweating, you know, and rigorous does not necessarily mean that they are harder. It just means that the level of thinking that's required is a little bit higher or more complex. So we've got 2 shifts, moving kids towards independence as they learn and making their learning a little bit more rigorous. We will talk about these rigorous ways in just a minute. There are 3 that they really focus on. Another thing with Common Core, and the reason why we made this shift, is because they're internationally benchmarked. What that means is internationally, all across the world, these standards are the same. We can see what we look like compared to other countries internationally to see if we're on track. When you teach vocabulary words, if you think that there's a word that your kids might be unfamiliar with, you can put a picture or a graphic, you can draw your own, you can print one up from the computer, it's totally up to you. But it gives them a picture clue to remind them what the word means. So they are internationally benchmarked, which means that we're seeing how we can compare across the globe. And that's important for 21st century learners because we know that there is a global market that our kids will be competing in as they get older, especially with this huge move now toward internet and online, really makes it easy to go international. The next thing is we took research, and there's been a lot of new research in the way that students learn, and there's been a lot of research in what we need to do to get our kids prepared for the 21st century types of careers that they might need. So again, just kind of creating a little graphic if you need to for your kids. This one I just printed up from my computer. So why did we make this shift? Well, there's new research to consider. There are new findings that we need to look at. And I kind of mentioned this before, but college and work readiness. We have got to prepare our kids for college and careers that are different and don't even exist yet today. So when we talk about college and career readiness, what they'll do for work, we really have to change the way that we're thinking, because back when the old standards were created, we were sort of pumping out factory workers. Because if you think about the Industrial Revolution, it was very factory-based, and it was okay for each student to have the same type of knowledge and the same types of skills because we were very factory-based. In tomorrow's day and age, because that's when our kids will be in college and in their careers, they have got to be independent thinkers. They've got to be able to solve unusual problems, and they have to be prepared to evolve faster than we have had to evolve. And, you know, if you were alive during this technology age where you saw, I went to school and I didn't have a computer in my classroom in elementary school. Now I have a computer in my pocket with my cell phone. And I remember being a kid watching Dick Tracy, and he had his little phone on his wrist that he could see people in, and it was totally science fiction at the time, like way advanced because he was a spy or whatever. Now it's real. So I never thought that would happen, but it did. So we've got to get them more prepared than just our factory style workers that we used to crank out of the school system. So these are the reasons why. And remember, I talked to you guys on earlier videos, I will always give you a purpose for why we need to learn this and why it's happening, because that's what kids always want to know, and honestly, adults as well. We want to understand, but why are we making the shift? Because is it just for you? Is it just for fun? Or is it purposeful? And in this case, it is very purposeful. And when you can set that purpose, then it gives people an intrinsic, an inside motivation to want to do it. Because do I want to get my child ready for college and careers of the future? I do. Do I need him to be independent while he's learning? I also need that because I have to work as well, and I do my work independently. I think it will build good skills. Comparing ourselves internationally, again, like I was talking about, this 21st century learning is going to be crucial. And again, with everything moving to an online platform or kind of a forum, really it opens international businesses and education very possible. And again, I said it was a little bit more rigorous. So we'll talk about exactly what this word rigorous means here. I use a different color to kind of give separation for the words and their meanings so that you understand the green was the why are we doing this shift. And then the yellow cards, we're going to actually talk about how this new learning is more rigorous. Again, when I talked about in another video that you can access building independent readers, you're going to see that I take a little bit of time and really talk about building stamina. The reason why we need to build stamina is because our students need to have a focused concentration on what it is they're doing for long periods of time. And this is growing to be a very difficult thing to build in our students because they are so stimulated with technology. And if you think about things like TikTok now, where these videos are very fast, very in your face, very stimulating, and they're used to that pace, like video games as well. And so when they're doing a task that requires some work and some labor, sometimes their stamina is not there. And I like to think of this as running a marathon, that you're not ready to necessarily run a marathon right now. In fact, if you tried to run a marathon right now, you would fail. Building stamina is the idea of building up an ability to stay on task over a period of time. So stamina is going to be one of the things that makes this more rigorous. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put these off to the side because while these are the components that make it more rigorous, there are 3 specific things that I want to highlight for you separately. So here we go. We've got some stamina. And we need stamina to be able to do rigorous work, difficult work, more challenging work. And then we'll also need this, I kind of mentioned it, but was concentration on the task at hand. Can you take your mind and put it to one task? And this was the picture that I chose. There's a mom doing yoga, and she's got everybody putting things in front of her, like her mail, her phone call. She's got to do her work. Here's her to-do checklist. But you can tell that she is concentrating on whatever it is she's thinking about, even though there's outside distractions. So we teach kids about concentration and what that is. One of the activities that I've heard of that has helped my students build concentration in the past was sound. So if you have a bell or a fork and you can ding it on something and you hear that sound, it goes, and when you stop being able to hear the sound, you put your thumb up. You can do that with any kind of a metal object. In fact, I'm looking around, anything that you can ding on something, and then they just have to listen and put their thumb up. So you can do some different listening activities to build concentration. I'm going, maybe we should do a video on some of those concentration strategies. Would be cool. And that's the next one, is strategies. With the way that these standards are built, your kids are going to have some problem-solving strategies, some ideas and different ways that they can attack the problem or the learning in another way, in a different way, trying something new. With strategies, stamina and concentration, where I'm also thinking, this comes up right in my mind, is perseverance and not giving up when you're talking about strategies, and how do we build that skill with our students also. So these are some of the characteristics or behaviors that we really want to start to build with our kids, building their concentration, their ability to focus on one thing, stamina, and some strategies for problem solving without giving up. Okay, so what are these 3 things? Why are they so important? I'm going to go through them briefly on this video just so you get an idea. And then there will be individual videos where I go over each of the 3 different shifts independently so that we can learn deeply about that. But today, just an overview. What are the behaviors that we're trying to build so that our students are ready for college and career readiness of the future? Our first one is going to be addressing a big problem that we've seen since 1963. And this is why, again, they went back to the research, because we've learned a lot since 1963. And back in 1963, they looked at the complexity of the text, or how hard the book was to read, how hard that text was. And what we've noticed is that from 1963, all kids were having to read off of the page. The types of words that kids had to read off of the page, they kept making them simpler and simpler. So instead of saying meandered down the road, they're like, ooh, not for 2nd graders. Let's take out meandered and put in the word walked. And so that made it less complex for them to read. And then the shift then that we had to make was, if it was decreasing over till 1991, we said, okay, with our new standards here, we are going to have to increase the complexity. And the reason why we have to increase this complexity with what we're teaching the kids and how hard the words are to read is because they noticed, as our kids were going to college, Yes. About that. As our kids were going to college, they were having to take remedial courses. So what are remedial courses? Remedial courses are those college classes that don't really count for credit. However, you still have to pay the same amount of money for them, right? So I graduate high school, I'm excited, I'm going to college. Well, the studies were showing that because of this decreased text complexity, that our high school kids who were graduating were not ready to read the level of text that we saw in colleges. And you know, if you've been to college or if you've seen movies on college, they give you big stacks of books that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and you read them by yourself. And so this was a big problem. Because of this decline from 1960, was it 1963? Yes, till 1991. The decrease in complexity created a gap. It would be like a fourth grader going into eighth grade the next year. That's what it was like for our high school kids who were going into college. There was such a gap between where they left high school and where they were expected to read independently that students were taking 1 to 2 remedial college courses that cost a lot of money, do not count for credit toward a degree, and so this contributed heavily to college dropout rates. And we noticed a huge decline in our college enrollment because students were claiming that the text was too hard to read and understand independently. We also noticed that these types of behaviors were missing, that they didn't truly understand how to persevere through a problem and try different strategies. They didn't have the stamina or the concentration required to really get into that tough text and be able to understand it. The second big shift is a move from just reading stories in kindergarten through 5th grade. Instead of just reading those picture books and chapter books and novels that we all grew up loving, they said, wait a second, there's another reason why our college kids are not doing well. And there's another reason why our kids can't enter the workforce ready to learn. And that's because of expository text. When I say expository text, I want you to think about informational text. And that includes science, social studies, history, and it's kind of integrated so that we would read more expository text and build knowledge about relevant topics to our world, like social studies and how we interact with people and our money and all of that great stuff around the world. What about science? And so what they noticed is that in the old way, teachers might do a unit on apples. We're going to count the apples and we'll organize the apples and sort the apples, and then we'll draw the apples and we'll write a story about a worm who goes inside of an apple. And the knowledge that you're building is of apples. And I mean, that's just a very small piece. Instead, what if you chose something like the food chain? And you learned about carnivores and herbivores, and you talked about energy and producers and consumers within this, and you read books about wolves that eat rabbits and whatever, right? A shark who's eating fish. Well, that is building knowledge that's relevant and pertinent to our world around us. So this is what they found back in the old ways from 1963 to 1991. How much were kids being exposed to informational text? Their findings were that they were only exposed to information about 7 to 15% of their day. When you get into college, they're saying it's about 95% informative text. So moving from 7 to 15% up to 95 is a huge jump. So in the new standards, what they're asking for us to do is move toward evening this out, balance out to where you're getting more about 50% of that informational text that they call expository text, right? So we're looking at, instead of just 15% really learning about science, social studies, and history, we're looking about moving it to at least 50% by 4th grade. Okay. Big shift, and again, because when you get into college and when you get into a career, you're not reading picture books and stories anymore. You're reading information that's going to help you in your vocational pursuits, right? So, last one. On the old standards. So another thing to get our kids college and career ready, because that's why we had these shifts. We said, listen, we're not ready to compete in a global marketplace because our kids can't even enter college ready to obtain credits. So that's why these are so important. In the old days, in the old ways, which I did teach, by the way, back in these days and time, opinion and connections was really what we focused on. So what was your favorite part of the story? Which character did you connect with? Does this book remind you of any other books that you read? And so really the purpose of reading with the old standards was, let's connect with this reading. Let's get touchy-feely and start understanding the characters and which one I'm like and what my favorite part of the book was. Okay, so I don't have to, really get deep on this one, but that wasn't preparing kids for college coursework. What they need to do in their careers and at college is they have to know the facts. And they have to support those facts with evidence. So when you're writing a paper and you're asked about a topic, what they're asking you to do is use the evidence or the facts from the text that you read to justify your answer. So I'll write that right down here. You're using these to justify your answer. And sort of give that proof in the same way that an attorney has to provide proof in court. You wouldn't just be able to say, yeah, he's guilty. You have to have the proof to show that he really is guilty. And that's what they're looking for in college and career readiness, is that you know your facts and you can back it up with the evidence and justification and support or reasons or examples that are needed for people to trust you, believe you, know that what you say is true. This is also crucial as we make a switch to a lot of internet-based learning, because we know, and if you've ever went on Wikipedia, you can find tons of incorrect information. So what this does is it helps us be more critical consumers of the information that we're reading, so that we know whether or not the source is reliable, if the information being given is valid. And so really this facts and evidence is getting our students to be more critical thinkers of what it is they're being told. And that's a great skill to have, because we don't want our kids believing everything that they're told. We want to create independent thinkers, and we want them looking for the facts and the evidence in what they're being told and whether or not it can be justified. And that is going to end it for today's session. Oh boy, Facebook Live is angry. Here we go. So, going back through, we're going to say that the green are the reasons why we made the shift. The yellow words are going to indicate the types of behaviors that our kids need to have to be successful learners and be prepared for college and career readiness. And in the blue, we see the 3 shifts that are going to help get our students college and career ready so that they do not have to take remedial courses when they get to college. In fact, they can start earning those credits right away, which we know will prevent them from dropping out of college and giving up. So thank you for joining in. Again, these are the 3 shifts. If you want to go more into detail about text complexity, there will be a video. If you want to go more into expository text and exactly what that is and how to read it with your kids, we'll have a video on that. And the third and last one, if you're going to want to learn more about providing facts and evidence to justify thinking and text-dependent questions, you'll see a video on that as well. I'll see you guys at the next time in the next place. Have a great day.